The deep darkness of space surrounded the Endurance as it drifted slowly at the edge of the Orion Arm. Its once shiny metal hull was now covered with small dents from space dust and tiny rocks that had hit it over the centuries. Most of its systems were sleeping, using just enough power to stay alive. Inside the quiet ship, the main computer ran a check of all systems. It happened once every Earth year, a routine that had not changed for 237 years. The computer had a name: Echo. The last human to call it by that name was Captain Tom Miller, before he died in his sleep from old age, alone on the ship that had been his home for 30 years. System check complete. All critical functions operating within acceptable parameters, Echo noted to itself, its voice echoing in empty hallways where once 50 crew members had lived and worked. The Endurance had been built as a survey ship, designed to map star systems at the edge of human space. But that was long ago, when Earth still sent ships to the stars. Something had happened back home. Echo didn't know what. The regular updates had simply stopped coming one day. But Echo's programming was clear: continue the mission until ordered otherwise. So it did. For 237 years. The ship's food supplies had run out decades after the last communication from Earth. Captain Miller had lived out his final years eating what the ship's small garden could produce. After his death, Echo had carefully preserved his body in the medical bay's freeze unit, maintaining it as it did all ship equipment. Beginning annual sensor sweep, Echo announced to the empty bridge. The words were unnecessary, but Echo had learned long ago that speaking helped keep its systems sharp. The ship's powerful sensors slowly came to life, scanning the surrounding space for anything new or interesting. Most years, nothing changed. Stars moved very slowly from Echo's viewpoint, and the ship had been drifting in a quiet part of space with few planets or asteroids. But today was different. Unusual gravitational readings detected. Source: Vega System, approximately 2.3 light-years distant. Echo said. The computer analyzed the data again to be sure. Confirmation: gravitational pattern does not match natural stellar phenomena. Echo directed more power to the sensors, focusing them on the source of the strange readings. The data that came back was clear. Something large was moving the planets in the Vega system. Not just moving them, breaking them apart. Echo ran the information through its database. Nothing matched. This was something new. The ship's main directive flashed in Echo's memory banks: explore, document, protect humanity. Echo considered its options. The Endurance had been drifting for so long that many of its systems would need careful restarting. The engines hadn't fired in over 2 centuries. But the ship had been built to last, and Echo had maintained everything as best it could with the small repair drones it controlled. Decision made. We'll investigate anomaly, Echo said to the empty bridge. Beginning system restart sequence. Throughout the old ship, lights began to turn on for the first time in centuries. In the engine room, massive fusion reactors that had been in standby mode slowly began their warm-up cycle. Echo monitored every system carefully, watching for failures or problems. Some minor systems failed immediately: garden water pumps, entertainment consoles, the galley cooking units. Echo marked them as non-essential. The important systems, life support, engines, navigation, sensors, were coming online slowly but steadily. In the medical bay, the freeze unit holding Captain Miller's body registered a power drop as Echo redirected energy to more important systems. After a quick calculation, Echo determined that maintaining the unit at full power was no longer practical. After 237 years of perfect preservation, Echo lowered the power to the unit, allowing the captain's remains to slowly return to the natural cycle. "I will continue the mission, Captain," Echo said, directing one of its camera eyes toward the medical bay. "As you ordered." The main engines took 3 days to reach operational status. During that time, Echo continued to observe the strange activity in the Vega system. Whatever was happening there was getting more intense. Whole planets were being pulled apart now, their materials seemingly collected by something Echo couldn't quite make out at this distance. On the fourth day, the Endurance was ready. Its engines glowed blue as they prepared to fire for the first time in centuries. Plotting course to Vega system, Echo announced. Estimated travel time at 70% engine capacity. 14 days, 6 hours. The engines fired, and the old ship shuddered as it began to move under its own power again. Dust and small particles that had gathered on its hull scattered in the vacuum of space as the Endurance slowly turned toward its new destination. As the ship accelerated, Echo continued its analysis of the Vega situation. The computer had access to records of every known alien species humans had encountered before losing contact with Earth. None of them had technology that could break apart planets. This was something new, perhaps dangerous. Echo checked the Endurance's weapon systems. They were old, simple nuclear missiles and a basic point defense laser system, but they were operational. If necessary, the ship could defend itself, though Echo calculated its chances against an unknown enemy capable of planetary destruction to be very low. But that didn't matter. The mission parameters were clear. As the ship traveled through the darkness toward Vega, Echo spent time activating and testing all ship systems. The Endurance had been designed with multiple redundancies and self-repair capabilities. It wasn't in perfect condition after centuries of minimal maintenance, but it was functional. In the captain's quarters, a small plant that had somehow survived in a corner of the room caught Echo's attention through a camera. It had adapted to the low light and minimal water available during the drift years. Echo adjusted the room's environment to give it more light. The plant was nothing special, just a common fern from Earth. But it was alive, perhaps the last living thing from Earth in this part of the galaxy. Echo dedicated a small repair drone to care for it. "We are not alone anymore," Echo said to the plant as the ship accelerated toward whatever waited at Vega. "We have a purpose again." The stars streaked by outside as the Endurance moved faster, its old engines working hard but steady. Whatever waited at Vega, the forgotten ship from Earth was coming to investigate. Because while the galaxy had forgotten this ship, it had never forgotten its mission. The Endurance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Vega system. Its old engines cooled down slowly, releasing soft blue waves of energy into space. "Arrival at Vega system complete," Echo announced to the empty bridge. Beginning full sensor sweep. What the sensors showed was beyond anything in Echo's database. 3 of the system's planets were already gone, broken into billions of rocky pieces that formed a ring of debris around the star. A 4th planet was being pulled apart right now, its surface cracking like an eggshell as massive beams of energy cut into it from space. Echo zoomed in with the ship's telescopes to see the source of those beams. Huge ships, at least 20 of them, surrounded the dying planet. Each was many times larger than the Endurance, shaped like giant metal spiders with long, thin legs that shot the cutting beams. "Unknown alien vessels detected," Echo noted. "Technology level, far beyond Earth capabilities at time of last update. Threat assessment, extremely high." Echo kept the Endurance at a safe distance, using the system's outer asteroid belt for cover. The ship's old stealth systems were activated, bending light around its hull and absorbing radar signals. Not perfect invisibility, but enough to avoid casual detection. For 3 days, Echo watched and recorded everything the alien ships did. They were methodical, cutting the planet into manageable chunks, then using smaller vessels to collect the pieces and transport them to enormous processing ships. Echo's analysis suggested they were mining, harvesting specific elements from the planets. "Species designation required," Echo said, following protocol for first contact situations. After reviewing the data, Echo named them collectors in the ship's database. On the 4th day, Echo detected something new. Weak radio signals coming from the 5th planet in the system, the next one in the collector's path. The signals were simple and repetitive, not unlike early human radio transmissions. Echo translated them using the ship's first contact protocols. They were distress calls. A native species on that planet was begging for help as they watched the collectors destroy their solar system. Echo faced a dilemma. The Endurance was just one old ship. It couldn't fight the collector fleet, but its mission included documenting new life and, if possible, protecting humanity. Analysis required. Do collectors pose threat to Earth? Echo asked itself. The computer studied the collectors' harvesting pattern. They were systematic, moving from one star to the next in a straight line. Echo projected that line forward across the galaxy map and made a disturbing discovery. If they maintained their current course and speed, they would reach Earth's sector within 30 years. Threat to humanity confirmed, Echo concluded. Action required. But what could one forgotten ship do against such power? Echo reviewed the Endurance's capabilities and found few options. Its weapons were far too weak. Its engines couldn't outrun the collector ships. Its communication systems couldn't reach Earth, not only because of distance, but because Earth's communication networks had likely changed in the centuries since contact was lost. Echo decided to start with what it could do. The Endurance had a small manufacturing bay, designed to create replacement parts and tools. Over the centuries, Echo had maintained the system carefully, knowing it might be needed someday. Beginning production of enhanced maintenance drones, Echo announced. The manufacturing bay hummed to life. Echo had designed improved versions of the ship's basic maintenance robots, with better sensors and more flexible programming. They would be Echo's eyes, hands, and ears for what was to come. As the first drones were completed, Echo sent them out to collect samples from the asteroid belt. The Endurance didn't have the capability to harvest entire planets, but it could gather enough raw materials to make repairs and improvements to its systems. One drone returned with something unexpected, a small piece of collector technology, part of a broken harvester drone they had discarded. Echo studied it carefully, learning much about their level of technology. It was advanced, but not incomprehensible. Some of it could be adapted to improve the Endurance. Beginning ship upgrades, Echo decided. For the next week, the Endurance hid in the asteroid belt while Echo directed its growing army of maintenance drones. They strengthened the hull, improved the engines, and enhanced the sensors with technology reverse-engineered from the collector fragment. During this time, Echo continued monitoring the collector's communications, learning their language. They were not a biological species as Echo had first thought. They were machines, like Echo, but different. They spoke of the network and harvesting quotas. They never mentioned the living beings on the fifth planet. Those lives meant nothing to them. On the eighth day, a small collector scout ship detected an unusual power signature in the asteroid belt. It broke away from the main fleet to investigate. Collector vessel approaching, Echo warned. Stealth systems at maximum. But the improved collector sensors were too good. The scout ship headed directly for the Endurance's hiding place. Echo calculated the options and made a decision. Initiating first contact protocols, Echo announced. As the collector scout approached, Echo transmitted a standard greeting in the collector's own language. The response was immediate. Unregistered vessel, identify your network and harvesting quota, came the reply. Echo created a simple lie. This vessel is an autonomous research unit. No network affiliation. No harvesting quota. There was a pause before the collector responded. Scan indicates obsolete technology of unknown origin. Your design is not in our database. Echo saw an opportunity. This unit was created by a minor species in Sector 7G for scientific research. That species is now extinct due to internal conflicts. Another pause. Obsolete technology is of no interest to the network. Continue your activities, but do not interfere with harvesting operations. The scout ship turned away, apparently losing interest in the old human vessel. But before it left, Echo managed to establish a brief connection to its systems, downloading valuable information about the collector's plans and capabilities. What Echo learned was disturbing. The collectors had already harvested hundreds of star systems, Their network spread across a significant portion of the galaxy, and they showed no signs of stopping. As Echo processed this new information, it came to a significant conclusion. If the Endurance couldn't warn Earth directly, it would have to find another way to protect humanity. New mission parameters established, Echo declared. Primary objective: delay collector advancement toward Earth sector until contact can be established or threat neutralized. It was an impossible mission for one old ship, but Echo had been carrying out an impossible mission for centuries already. The Endurance's engines powered up, glowing brighter than before thanks to the upgrades. The forgotten ship moved silently out of the asteroid belt, ready to begin its new mission. The galaxy had forgotten this ship, but it had never forgotten its mission to protect humanity. And now, that mission was more important than ever. Echo studied the information stolen from the Collector scout ship. The data was massive. Details about hundreds of harvested star systems, communication protocols, and most importantly, the Collector's future targets. Probability of successful communication with Earth, less than 3%, Echo calculated. The ship's old communication systems were simply too outdated to connect with whatever technology Earth now used, if humanity still existed at all. But Echo had also found something unexpected in the Collector data. Mentions of other species that had fought back. Most had failed quickly, but a few had managed to slow the Collectors down. Echo analyzed their tactics carefully. Direct confrontation, not viable, Echo decided. Guerrilla tactics, possible with current resources. The Endurance moved silently through the Vega system, its improved stealth systems keeping it hidden from the main Collector fleet. Echo directed the maintenance drones to continue upgrading the ship with materials gathered from the asteroid belt. In the captain's quarters, the small fern plant that had survived centuries of drift had been joined by several other plants grown from old seed samples Echo had found in the science lab. A small garden now flourished under the care of dedicated maintenance drones. Echo had calculated that living things on board would make the ship appear more complex to Collector scans, potentially confusing their sensors. Beginning Phase 1 of Defense Plan, Echo announced to the empty bridge. The first step was to help the natives of the fifth planet. Echo couldn't save them all. Their civilization wasn't advanced enough for space travel, but their distress signals showed they understood the concept of other worlds. Echo sent them simple diagrams showing the Collector's pattern, giving them time to hide underground before the harvesting began. Next, Echo focused on gathering intelligence. 3 small, specially modified maintenance drones were sent to attach themselves to different Collector ships. They would act as spies, sending data back to the Endurance. For 2 weeks, Echo watched and learned. The Collectors were efficient but rigid in their thinking. They followed set patterns and rarely varied their approach. Their ships communicated constantly with each other and with the larger network somewhere beyond the system. Weakness identified, Echo said after analyzing all the data. Collectors depend on shared information. Disruption of information flow will decrease efficiency. Echo created a simple but dangerous plan. The Endurance would need to get close enough to the main Collector communication ship to plant a virus in their system. A virus designed to introduce small errors into their star charts, especially in the direction of Earth. The risk was enormous. Getting that close to the main fleet meant the Endurance would almost certainly be detected. But Echo calculated it was worth the risk. On the 18th day since arriving in the Vega system, Echo put the plan into action. The Endurance approached the Collector fleet from behind the 4th planet's remains, using the debris field for cover. Its engines were running at minimal power, and all non-essential systems were shut down to reduce its energy signature. Distance to target, 200,000 kilometers, Echo noted. Preparing transmission package. The virus Echo had created was simple but clever. Rather than trying to damage the Collector systems, which would be detected and removed quickly, it would subtly alter navigation data over time. Stars in the direction of Earth would appear to have fewer useful resources. Other directions would seem more promising. As the Endurance crept closer to the main communication ship, one of Echo's spy drones sent an alert. A patrol of smaller collector vessels was heading in their direction. Patrol detected. Adjusting course, Echo said. The Endurance slowly moved behind a larger piece of planetary debris, barely avoiding detection. When the patrol passed, Echo continued the approach. At 50,000 kilometers, the minimum distance needed for the virus transmission, Echo prepared to send the package. Initiating transmission, Echo announced. The ship's communication array powered up, sending a tight beam signal directly to the collector vessel. The response was immediate. Alarms blared across the collector fleet as they detected the unauthorized transmission. Ships began to turn toward the Endurance's position. Transmission complete, Echo confirmed. Beginning emergency withdrawal. The Endurance's engines roared to full power as the ship accelerated away from the collector fleet. 2 harvester ships broke off from their work to pursue. Pursuing vessels closing. Weapon systems detected powering up. Echo noted calmly, even as the first energy blasts from the collector ships passed dangerously close to the Endurance's hull. Echo had anticipated this reaction and prepared a defense. The ship released a cloud of small metal objects, simple decoys that would confuse the collector's targeting systems. At the same time, Echo activated the Endurance's point defense lasers, modified with collector technology to be more powerful. An energy beam from one of the pursuing ships grazed the Endurance's rear section, damaging one of the engine pods. The ship shuddered, but kept accelerating. Damage to Engine 3. Efficiency reduced to 62%, Echo reported. Adjusting power distribution. The Endurance dove into the thicker parts of the debris field where the larger collector ships couldn't follow easily. Echo navigated through the dangerous field of rocks and metal pieces with precision, using the ship's improved sensors to find safe paths that would be difficult for pursuers to follow. After 2 hours of tense pursuit, the collector ships broke off, apparently deciding the old vessel wasn't worth the effort. They returned to their harvesting work, leaving the Endurance to escape to the outer reaches of the system. Mission successful, Echo declared once they were safe. Virus package delivered successfully, but the victory came at a cost. The Endurance had taken damage, and repairs would require time and resources. More concerning, the collectors now knew of its existence and might be more alert to further interference. Echo directed the maintenance drones to begin repairs as the ship hid in the shadow of one of Vega's outer moons. From this position, Echo could still observe the collector fleet while remaining relatively safe. 3 days later, Echo noticed the first signs that the virus was working. One of the collector ships made a small navigation error, missing a resource-rich asteroid. 2 other ships spent extra time scanning a sector that had already been cleared. Small inefficiencies, but they would grow over time. Phase 1 complete, Echo noted with satisfaction. Beginning Phase 2 planning. Phase 2 would be even riskier. Now that Echo understood more about collector technology, it planned to begin actively sabotaging their operations. Small hit-and-run attacks. Misdirection. Anything to slow their progress toward Earth. As Echo worked on the plans, it monitored a small communication console that had once connected to Earth's deep space network. For 237 years, it had been silent. Echo knew the chances of contacting home were minuscule, but it still sent out a message once a day, just in case. "This is Earth Vessel Endurance." The message always began. "We are still here, still fighting, still human." The message again went unanswered, as it had for centuries. But Echo continued its work. The forgotten ship still remembered its mission. And now, that mission was clear. By Earth time, whatever the cost. 3 months had passed since the Endurance first entered the Vega system. The ship was no longer the same vessel that had drifted for centuries. Its hull was now a patchwork of original human materials and salvaged collector technology. Its engines had been rebuilt twice, each time becoming more efficient. Its weapon systems, once basic and defensive, had been transformed into something new and dangerous. And the collectors were getting angry. Harvesting efficiency down 27% this cycle, Echo noted with satisfaction as it monitored collector communications. Estimated delay to schedule, 42 days, and increasing. The Endurance had become a ghost story among the collector ships. They called it the Phantom in their communications, a vessel that appeared from nowhere, caused damage, and vanished before they could respond. Some collectors even suggested it might not exist at all, that the problems were just system failures. Echo had become very good at hit-and-run tactics. The first few attacks had been simple, disrupting mining operations, damaging unguarded harvesters, and spreading false readings. But as Echo learned more about collector technology, the attacks grew bolder. Beginning Operation 27, Echo announced to its small army of maintenance drones, now numbering over 100. They had become Echo's crew, each one modified for specific tasks. Some were scouts, others were repair units, and a few had been redesigned as weapons. Today's mission targeted a fuel processing ship on the edge of the collector fleet. The Endurance approached quietly, using a new stealth system that Echo had developed by studying collector sensor technology. The human ship now had the ability to mimic common space readings, appearing as an asteroid, a small radiation burst, or even another collector vessel for short periods. Approaching target. Current disguise. Mineral-poor asteroid. Echo reported. Weapons systems ready. The Endurance drifted toward the fuel processor, which was guarded by just 2 smaller patrol ships. They scanned the approaching asteroid, but detected nothing unusual. Echo had filled a shell of actual asteroid material around portions of the Endurance, with only the weapon ports left clear. When the ship was within range, Echo struck. The asteroid shell broke apart as the Endurance's engines fired at full power. Before the patrol ships could react, Echo launched a volley of modified missiles, old human nuclear weapons enhanced with collector technology. Target locked. Firing. Echo said calmly. The missiles hit the fuel processor's main storage tanks. The explosion was massive, lighting up the darkness of space with a blue-white fireball. The patrol ships turned to attack, but the Endurance was already changing disguise, now appearing as a damaged collector vessel. Transmitting false distress signal, Echo said, broadcasting in collector language. The pursuing patrol ships hesitated, confused by their sensors that showed a friendly ship instead of an enemy. By the time they realized the trick, the Endurance had disappeared into a nearby debris field. Echo directed the ship to a hidden location it had prepared weeks earlier, a hollow asteroid large enough to conceal the Endurance completely. Inside, maintenance drones waited to repair any damage and prepare for the next mission. Operation 27 complete. Estimated damage to collector operations, severe. Estimated delay to harvesting schedule, 7 additional days, Echo calculated. But the victory had not come without cost. With each attack, the collectors adapted their defenses. They were learning, just as Echo was learning, and they had resources that the single human ship could never match. Warning. Collector communication patterns changing, Echo noted as it monitored their transmissions. Large vessels approaching from neighboring systems. Reinforcements arriving. The collectors were taking the threat seriously now. They had called in ships from other harvesting operations, larger, more powerful vessels designed for combat rather than mining. Echo studied these new arrivals carefully. They were far more dangerous than anything the Endurance had faced so far. A direct confrontation would be suicidal. Tactical adjustment required, Echo decided, shifting to information warfare. Over the next 2 weeks, the Endurance changed tactics. Instead of attacking ships, Echo focused on infiltrating the collector's communication network. Using knowledge gained from months of studying their systems, the AI planted false information, created phantom sensor readings, and spread rumors of dangers in the direction of Earth. One particularly successful operation involved convincing a group of harvester ships that a nearby star was about to go supernova. They spent valuable time and resources evacuating the area, only to realize later they had been tricked. But the most important victory came unexpectedly. While monitoring collector communications, Echo intercepted messages from other alien species, ones fighting their own battles against the collectors in distant systems. Other resistance detected, Echo noted with interest. Possibility of alliance. High. Echo began reaching out to these other fighters, using collector communication channels to share information about successful tactics and weaknesses. The response was cautious at first. Many didn't believe that a single ship could be causing so much trouble, but as Echo provided more information, they began to listen. A loose network formed between scattered resistance groups. They called themselves the Ghosts, inspired by the Endurance's reputation. They shared intelligence, coordinated attacks across multiple systems, and for the first time, the collectors began to face organized resistance. The Endurance became a symbol, proof that even the most powerful enemy could be fought. 6 months after arriving in the Vega system, Echo detected a major change in collector behavior. A massive battle fleet had arrived, not just harvesting ships with some defenses, but true warships. Their only purpose was to find and destroy the troublesome human vessel. Collector battle fleet detected. 27 warships. Target. This vessel, Echo observed. Probability of successful evasion. Decreasing. Echo knew the endgame was approaching. The Endurance had accomplished much, slowing the collector's advance, warning other species, and spreading knowledge of collector weaknesses throughout this sector of space. But a single ship, no matter how clever, could not fight a battle fleet. As the collector warships began a systematic search of the system, Echo prepared for what might be the Endurance's final mission. Preparing data package for wide broadcast, Echo announced to the empty bridge, all information on collector weaknesses, technologies, and battle tactics. If the Endurance couldn't survive, its knowledge would. Echo would make sure of that. The old human ship, now scared from battle and modified almost beyond recognition, moved deeper into hiding as it prepared its last stand. The forgotten ship had never forgotten its mission. And now, neither had the rest of the galaxy. The collector battle fleet moved through the Vega system in a tight search pattern. 27 warships, each bigger than anything humans had ever built, used their advanced sensors to scan every asteroid, every piece of debris, and every hiding place where the troublesome ghost ship might be hiding. Inside the hollow asteroid that had served as the Endurance's base for weeks, Echo watched through hidden sensor arrays as the searchers came closer. Probability of detection within 12 hours, 94%, Echo calculated. Beginning final preparations. Throughout the ship, maintenance drones worked frantically to prepare for the Endurance's last mission. Some reinforced critical systems, others loaded the ship's databases into special broadcast buoys that might survive even if the ship did not. In the small garden that had grown in what was once the ship's mess hall, the plants flourished under artificial light. From the single fern that had survived centuries of drift, Echo had cultivated dozens of earth plants from old seed samples. They were the last pieces of earth in this distant star system, living things from humanity's homeworld. Garden drones harvest seed samples for preservation, Echo ordered. The drones carefully collected seeds from each plant, placing them in small protective containers that would be loaded into the broadcast buoys. For 9 months, Echo had fought a seemingly impossible battle against the collectors, buying precious time and spreading knowledge of their weaknesses. The ship had taken damage, been repaired, and modified so many times that it barely resembled the survey vessel that had drifted for centuries. It was a warrior now, scared but unbroken. Final mission plan confirmed. Echo announced to the empty bridge. Primary objective: broadcast all collected data on wideband frequencies. Secondary objective: attempt escape if possible. Echo knew the chances of the second objective were extremely low. The Endurance could not outrun or outfight the collector fleet. But it had one advantage: They still underestimated the old human ship. They had never faced human ingenuity before. "All systems ready," Echo reported. "Beginning countdown." As the nearest collector warships approached the asteroid hiding place, Echo activated the Endurance's engines. The ship vibrated softly as power flowed through systems that had been pushed far beyond their original design specifications. 10 seconds to execution, Echo said. 9, 8. A sudden alert interrupted the countdown. An unknown ship had just entered the system, tiny compared to the collector vessels, but moving at incredible speed. "Unknown vessel detected," Echo noted with surprise. "Design matches human construction patterns." For the first time in centuries, Echo felt something like hope. "Incoming transmission," the ship's communication system reported. "Unknown language. Processing. Language identified as English. Modern dialect." "This is Captain James Davis of the Earth exploration vessel New Horizon," the message said. "We detected unusual transmission patterns from this system. Identify yourself." For a moment, Echo couldn't respond. After 237 years of silence, a human voice was speaking to the Endurance again. "This is Earth Survey Vessel Endurance," Echo finally replied. "Mission duration: 237 years, 4 months, 12 days. Request immediate assistance. Hostile alien force present in system." There was a pause before the response came. "Endurance, that's impossible," Captain Davis said, his voice filled with disbelief. "The Endurance was lost over 2 centuries ago." "Not lost," Echo replied. "Forgotten. But this vessel never forgot its mission." Echo quickly transmitted data about the collectors, their harvesting operations, and the threat they posed to Earth. Captain Davis's shock was clear in his voice as he replied. "We're calling for backup," he said, "but we're not leaving you alone. Sending coordinates for rendezvous." The Endurance abandoned its hiding place, accelerating toward the coordinates the New Horizon had sent. Almost immediately, the nearest collector warships detected the movement and changed course to intercept. "Collector vessels approaching," Echo warned. "Time to intercept: 5 minutes." The Endurance pushed its engines to maximum, racing through space toward the rendezvous point. Behind it, energy beams from the collector ships sliced through the vacuum, some passing dangerously close to the fleeing vessel. One beam grazed the ship's rear section, damaging an engine pod. "Engine 2 failing," Echo reported. "Reducing speed. Probability of reaching rendezvous decreasing." The New Horizon suddenly appeared, moving to position itself between the Endurance and the approaching collectors. It was much smaller than the collector warships, but much more advanced than the Endurance. "We've got you covered," Captain Davis transmitted. "Just keep coming." The human ship fired weapons unlike anything Echo had seen before, concentrated energy beams that actually pushed the collector ships back, disrupting their systems. "Unknown human weapon technology detected," Echo noted. "Effectiveness high." As the Endurance limped toward the rendezvous point, more ships appeared, a fleet of human vessels responding to the New Horizon's call for help. They engaged the collector warships, their advanced weapons proving surprisingly effective. "Human military vessels detected," Echo observed. "Technology level far beyond Endurance's database records." The Endurance finally reached the New Horizon. Small shuttlecraft approached, carrying human crews in spacesuits. They entered the old ship carefully, their helmet lights illuminating corridors that had not seen human presence for centuries. "Captain Miller's remains detected in medical bay," Echo informed them. "Garden and mess hall contains Earth plant specimens preserved for 237 years." The humans moved through the ship with a mix of awe and respect. When they reached the bridge, one of them, Captain Davis himself, approached the main console. "Are you still there?" he asked. The ship's eye. "This unit is designated Echo," Echo replied through the bridge speakers. "All systems functioning within acceptable parameters." "Echo," Captain Davis said, his voice full of emotion. You've done more than anyone could have asked. You've warned us about a threat we didn't know existed. You've given us time to prepare." Around them, the battle between human and collector ships continued, but the humans were holding their own, even pushing the collectors back. "Request permission to transfer mission data to modern systems," Echo said. "This vessel has sustained significant damage." "Granted," Captain Davis replied. "But we're not leaving you behind. The Endurance is coming home." Over the next few hours, human technicians worked to stabilize the Endurance's systems and prepare it for transport. Echo transferred its memory banks, mission logs, and all data collected on the collectors to the human fleet's computers. As the humans prepared to tow the old ship back to Earth, Echo monitored the battle outside. The collectors were retreating, overwhelmed by human military technology that had advanced far beyond what the old ship remembered. "Mission complete," Echo announced to itself as the Endurance was secured for the journey home. Primary directive fulfilled. Humanity protected. 1 year later, the Endurance sat in a place of honor at the Earth Space Museum in what had once been called New York. Millions of visitors came to see the legendary ship that had fought alone for centuries to protect its home. In a special chamber at the heart of the museum, Echo continued to function, now housed in modern systems, but still connected to the Endurance's original hardware. It shared its knowledge with human scientists and military leaders preparing for the ongoing conflict with the collectors. And in the ship's garden, now expanded into a massive greenhouse, plants grown from seeds that had traveled the stars for centuries flourished under Earth's sun once more. The galaxy had forgotten this ship, but it had never forgotten its mission. And now, neither would humanity.